okay? And so what we're going to do now is I'm going to reiterate some of that information that I covered earlier about PPA 697. And let me go ahead and share out my screen and just kind of walk you through some of the things that you'll be doing for 697. So let's share the screen out. All right. I'm probably not logged in anymore, so I'm probably going to have to. Oh, I look like I'm still logged in. Okay. Hopefully you are seeing the 697 Canvas site. If you can't see that, please let me know, but hopefully that's what you see on your screen. And everyone or almost everyone should be enrolled in the 697 Canvas site. So you should have access to it and to this information. And I have it in student view, so it should look pretty similar to what you see whenever you log into the site. What Dr. Butts has done is he's uploaded all the case studies and the instructions. You can get all those on the home page right there under undated assignments. Then what I've done is if you click on modules, I've put a couple of documents in there to help you out a little bit. The first one is your student learning portfolio instructions. And so I have attached a link to a video for how you submit your student learning portfolio. The portfolio obviously will be submitted after you have completed and gotten grades on your 5 case studies, and then after you complete your final skills self-assessment. And so we use OneDrive in order to submit the portfolio. And so in that video, I show you how to set up your different folders, part 1, part 2, and part 3 of the portfolio, and then how you then share it with me through OneDrive. And again, you'll be sharing it with me, and then I'll be reviewing all the portfolios for the entire cohort. I've also appended there then the final skills self-assessment. The final skills self-assessment you'll be completing after you have completed all 5 of your case studies. So it's kind of the last thing you do in 697. So once all 5 of your case studies are done and they are graded and you have completed your final skills self-assessment, you'll then have all the parts that you need for your student learning portfolio. So at that time, you can feel free to go ahead, share your portfolio with me, and we can get that requirement checked off of your transcript. But you'll have to have all 5 case studies done and graded, and the final skills self-assessment completed as well. The final skills self-assessment doesn't get submitted to this site. It just goes into your portfolio as part 1 of the portfolio. The portfolio, remember, as we discussed, has 3 different parts to it. Part 1 of the portfolio will be the initial skills self-assessment you did as part of your 500 course, and then the final skills self-assessment you're doing here at the end of your work in 697. Then part 2 of the portfolio will be those pre and post-instructional assignments from budgeting, human resources, organization theory, policy analysis, and research methods. Again, if you don't know what those pre and post-instructional assignments were, reach out to the instructor, and the instructor should be able to tell you, if it's not in the syllabus, what they consider to be the pre and post-instructional assignments. If you reach out to your instructor and you can't get a hold of them for some reason, feel free to contact me and I can then intervene. And sometimes if I intervene, I can get a quicker response from the instructor. Part 2 will be those pre and post-instructional assignments. For this class, the pre-instructional assignment, those Canvas essays that you've completed, those will comprise the pre-instructional, and then the post-instructional obviously will then be the organizational analysis paper. Then in part 3 of the portfolio will just be those 5 case studies. So you just submit your 5 case studies in part 3, attach a title page to the whole thing, your name and your student number, and that's the entire student learning portfolio. So again, once you're finished with 697, you should have all the work you need in order to submit your portfolio. But that video shows you how to do it. But then also I've appended here a link to an Excel tutorial. This Excel tutorial was created by Dr. Moore about 1.5 years or 2 years ago. And it consists of a series of videos. So if you're not terribly familiar with using Excel, it gives you a list of several different videos that will take you through all the major skills that you need in order to put a spreadsheet together using Excel. And I include that there just kind of as a refresher for you, because one of the cases will require that you create a budget in an Excel spreadsheet. So if you don't have a lot of working familiarity, That's just another resource there that's available for you. But as we go back here to the front page of the class, again, this is where you'll find all your case studies and all the instructions for how to complete the case studies. I will be grading your budgeting, your 555, your 577, and most of your 660 cases. Dr. Butts will then grade your 670 and your 696 cases. So let me now show you what some of the requirements look like. Hopefully you can see 697 case exercise for PPA 555. This is a case that you're going to be using for your 555 case study here in 697. I'm not going to go through all the cases because, again, they're supposed to be assessment mechanisms. And so we kind of defeat the purpose if I walk you through all the cases and kind of show you how to do things. So I'm going to leave that up to you. But just generally with this budgeting case study, you're faced with a case where a school district is creating a summer school, or, as we oftentimes call it in California, ESY, extended school year. And so they're creating this summer school. And then your job is, based upon the details in this case study, you will then put together there we go. You will then put together a Excel spreadsheet containing 3 worksheets. So one spreadsheet, but that spreadsheet will then contain 3 worksheets. The first worksheet will then be labeled as data. The second spreadsheet will be your base budget, and then the third spreadsheet will be your alternative budget. Essentially, what the case requires you to do is put together a budget for this summer school, and then it provides you with some different scenarios. And so you'll lose a certain number of students every month will be dropping out of summer school. And so you'll have to have a couple different scenarios. And so the dropout rate for one scenario will be 25%. The dropout rate for another scenario will be 15%. Another new assumption that you'll have to deal with in terms of your alternate budget is that you'll find out that teachers, once they are hired to teach in summer school, that they cannot be laid off or fired. And so even though your student population is going down each month of the summer, your staff costs are going to remain the same. And so you'll be creating an alternate budget in your third tab based upon those different new assumptions that are presented to you. Essentially, what you're going to be submitting here for this case study will be that Excel spreadsheet. And again, the Excel spreadsheet should then have the 3 different tabs: the data tab, the base budget tab, and the alternative budget tab. And then it takes you through and kind of tells you all the things you'll need to include in that budget. So you'll be creating a spreadsheet as the resulting project that you will have from this 555 case study. There's a grading rubric there. We look very closely at the accuracy of your calculations. That's 40%. Flexibility of the worksheet is flexible through application of Excel capabilities, functions, and formulas, 50%. So how well can you use Excel to put the spreadsheet together? And then presentation quality is your spreadsheet well organized, clear, and understandable. So that's going to be the grading rubric then for that spreadsheet that you're going to be creating for the budgeting case. So the budgeting case is unique in that for the budgeting case, you're creating this spreadsheet as opposed to a narrative description that you're going to be doing for your other case studies. Your second case study, and again, you can do these case studies in any order that you would like to. Just do be aware that Dr. Butts is the instructor of record for the first section of 697. I am the instructor of record for the second section of 697. So for this first section of 697, since Dr. Butts is the instructor of record, it may be good for you to do the 670 and 696 cases first, since he will be active in the class and grading those cases at that point in time. If you complete, budgeting or HR or org theory cases, I will still be checking into the class and be grading things along the way. But Dr. Butts will be much more engaged in grading assignments in that first section, and then I'll be more engaged in the second section. So 670, 696 would make sense to start out with for the first section, at least get through those, and then the second section, then you can move to the budgeting and the HR and org theory cases. But again, I leave it up to you. If you want to do them in a different order, you can. It just the grading may be delayed a little bit. So your 577 human resource management case study, I'm not going to take you through the case itself, but oops, sure that doesn't disappear on me. But what you'll be doing for this one, we're gonna play around with the requirements a little bit here in the DL program, but you're going to be producing a memo, and in your memo you will be responding to these different elements. So in your memo, you will identify the issue that is discussed in the case. You will then talk about the facts of the case. You will then talk about the position of the parties that are involved in the case. You will then analyze the issue, and then you'll provide a recommendation. So the memo that you submit for 577 case study should consist of those 5 elements: issue identification, facts of the case, position of the parties, issue analysis, and then recommendation. Now, I know the instructions tell you that it needs to be exactly 10 pages. For our purposes, it does not. I'm not really big on page limits and saying it has to be this long or this short. I think as long as you are including information addressing those 5 different areas, it can be as long or as short as you would like for it to be. But since it is a memo, you do want to try for parsimony, try to be as concise as you can. And in this case, essentially what you have is you have a disagreement about classification and pay. And so someone is then grieving this issue that they have, read through the case, and then provide a memo answering those 5 different areas. And again, there's a grading rubric: completeness, the quality of the analysis, the use of facts, and in your memo, your analysis section, recommendations, and then there's a 10-point quality of writing component as well. But that is your 577 case study. Then let's take a look at your 660 case study. Your 660 case study for organization theory deals with the creation of a new organization and some of the challenges that occur with the creation of this new organization. So your assignment then, after reading through the case, is number 1, what would you do in response to this case? So put yourself in the shoes of this organization's leadership team. How do you proceed in addressing the challenges that were discussed in the case study? Who are your primary stakeholders? How will you prove yourself to them in ways that secure enough financial and political resources for your survival and ultimately reauthorization for the organization? How would you embed yourself into the private practitioner community without competing? How will you convince potential client agencies and the federal government of the value of your services? How will you balance both appropriations and service fees? Essentially, you're just talking about how you would deal with the situation that's laid out for you there in the case study. So what would you do? Identify the key challenges to the organization going forward. Restate those challenges in more general terms as problems of organization theory. And this is a big part here. Draw on organization theory literature to address these problems. And so this is one thing that we're going to be looking at very closely in this case, is your ability to draw upon the organization theory literature that we've discussed in this class, and then incorporating the appropriate authors into crafting your answer for this case study. So you certainly will want to include more than one organizational theorist in your answer here in terms of how you would approach this case study. And then your answer will be evaluated based upon how complete your analysis was. Were the major issues, are there any major issues that you overlooked? The value added component, how effectively did you draw on the organization theory literature to support your analysis? As you can see, this is the biggest part of the grading rubric. This is what we're really going to be focusing on. And then, as always, how well structured and well written is your response? Was there a logical flow, clear phrasing? That's your quality of writing type of component. But the primary focus will be on your ability to pull in appropriate theorists from the organization theory literature and apply them in a relevant way to this case study. So that's your 660. And again, we've covered a lot of theorists in this class, and so you've got a lot of theorists to choose from. Asel, go ahead.
Thanks, Dr. Powell. I know that the majority of this class we spent it analyzing the theories and the theorists and implementing an analysis on that. It seems like in this specific case study, we're going to do a little bit more than that in the first section of what would you do. How would you suggest us using the knowledge that we've gained from these theorists to implement it in that section?
Yeah, I think that that first section is probably not going to come directly from a lot of the theories that we talked about. I think this is going to be more your reaction to what you would do in that situation. So in the what you do section, you don't really have to incorporate organization theorists. This is kind of from your knowledge and your experience of working in organizations. It's really in that second section, the how would you do it. That's where we're really going to be bringing in these organization theorists. And so what would Mary Parker Follett say about dealing with this situation? What would Max Weber say about dealing with this situation? So it's really that second section, the how would you do it section. That's where organization theorists will come into play. The first section is kind of just from your experience of being in organizations and responding to it from your experience of being in an organization.
Great. Thank you so much for expanding upon that. And also, what is the page length and that you're looking for this, and also like the parameters if it's double spaced?
Yeah, yeah, definitely double space. And in terms of the page length, it's really going to depend upon how many theorists you bring in. Usually what I tend to see is about 5 to 7 pages is usually sufficient for this one. You don't have to talk about every theorist that we discussed in class. You'll just be selecting the theorists that you think are appropriate to inform your answer to the how would you do it section. So yeah, you don't have to use everybody, but I would say about 5 to 7 pages is what it's been in the past.
Thank you.
Sure, good questions. And I think the 661 is one that you'll probably, the case itself is, I didn't write the case. The case was provided by Dr. Weber, and it's a case that was written by others. I forget exactly where it came from, but it's kind of a dense case in terms of a lot of the details in the case. So I think the one thing to try and avoid is try to avoid getting caught up in all those details. And it's kind of like, seeing the forest instead of just the trees. That's kind of what we're looking for here. So try and get the big picture out of reading the case rather than getting hung up on a lot of the details. And again, my primary focus when I grade it will be, did you use appropriate theorists? Did you interpret those theorists appropriately? And how well do those theorists then apply to informing how you would deal with this situation in this organization? So that's really what I'm looking at, is how well you can navigate through the organization theory literature and then determine which theorists are appropriate and use those appropriate theorists. And then your 670 policy case, for this one, you're going to be putting together kind of that basic policy analysis type of an approach that I'm sure you did in your 670. And in this one, what you're going to be doing is, based upon the case that you read, you're going to put together a policy analysis in which you will provide an overview of the problem with problem determination, a problem statement. You will then have a section where you discuss your relevant stakeholders, all possible stakeholders. Then you'll have a section, problem formulation, summarize the boundaries of the policy problem, such as length of time it's existed, where it's located, events that have occurred to help shape that problem. A section on policy alternatives, where you develop several alternatives and each stakeholder group's support or opposition for each one of those alternatives. Then also considering their implementation outcomes for each of those alternatives. Then after you present those alternatives, then you'll assess those alternatives, define each specific approach, criteria, or technique you'll use to analyze those alternatives that you have provided in the preceding section, display and thoroughly discuss the results of your analysis. So show how the alternatives compare to each other based upon your analysis. Then you'll make a final recommendation, recommend a solution, one of those alternatives, or maybe a combination of alternatives based upon your analysis of those alternatives. Then you will be putting this in APA format like everything that you do use now. You don't have to use external sources to do this. This is just looking at the information that you acquired in your 670 course, but you'll make sure that you put it in somewhat APA format. for a grand total of 100 points. But you can see as we are assigning points in this grading rubric, the most heavily graded component of your response will be your assessment of your alternatives. So you're going to provide alternatives in the policy alternatives section and then assess those alternatives. So if you combine your identification of alternatives with your assessment of alternatives section, that's going to add up to 45% of the entire grade for the case study. Again, usually these tend to be about 5 to 7 pages in length. If you need to go beyond that because there is a lot you're covering here, that's absolutely fine. And then Dr. Butts, who regularly teaches policy on campus, he will then be reviewing this case for you. I believe this case comes from Dr. Matthews, and I believe you had Dr. Matthews for your policy course. So hopefully you're familiar with doing these types of things in a general policy analysis. And then your fifth case is your research methods case, but which you took that course, I believe, with Dr. Butts. And you know that the way we teach research methods here, it's more of a program evaluation type of orientation. So in this case, what you're doing is you're going to be required to essentially put together a program evaluation in the same way that you did in that 696 course. So after reading the case, you will then put together an evaluation proposal in which you will identify your research questions and hypotheses that you'll be using. You'll identify your indicators and variables that you'll be measuring, including your dependent, independent, and any control variables that would be necessary. You'll identify and justify your research design. You're using an experimental design, a quasi-experimental design, and a justification for why, and what that design means then for threats to internal and external validity. What sampling design you would recommend, justification for that sampling design. So in other words, how will you decide where your subjects and information will come from to measure your indicators? So if you remember back to your research methods course, we talked about sampling designs, 2 broad categories, probability and non-probability. Probability sampling designs have random selection. Non-probability sampling designs do not have random selection. But which sampling design would be most appropriate and why? And then the type of data that you will need to collect, what data are necessary to answer the questions and measure your variables, and then how you collect that data. You can collect it through surveys, questionnaires, you can collect it through interviews, through focus groups. What's the most appropriate way to collect your data and justify that? And then the data analysis techniques that you would recommend, what specific statistical techniques would be most appropriate for analyzing the data. Again, this is a design just like you did in your 696 course, so there's no data you actually need to collect or analyze. You're just talking about this is how I would do it if I was actually going to evaluate this program from this case study. You see how the points are distributed, 15% for your questions and your hypothesis, 15% for your definition and measurement of variables, 15% for your justification of your research design, 15% for your justification of your sampling design, 15% for your data collection method and justification, 15% then for your data analysis techniques that you are recommending and justification, and then 10% for quality of writing component. Again, these tend to be about 5 to 7 pages, but if you need to go longer than that, that's absolutely fine as well. This should all ring very familiar to you because this is the type of activity that you did in 696 with Dr. Butts. And this is a case study that Dr. Butts created. And so there should be really nice alignment with what you covered in 696 and your ability then to do this research methods case. So those are those 5 cases that you will be doing. Your grade in 697 will be the average grade of those 5 case studies. So if you do not finish all 5 case studies by the end of the first section of 697, that's not a problem. You'll receive the report in progress or the RP grade, which is a placeholder that will then be replaced with the actual grade in the course whenever you've completed and had all 5 case studies graded. The grade that you get in the first section of 697 will be the same grade that you get in the second section of 697 because they are both the average that you get on the 5 cases. Since this is a culminating activity in a graduate level program, the Cal State system requires that in order to successfully complete it, you have to complete it with at least a grade of a B. So at least an overall average grade of 80% across the 5 cases, which means that if for some reason, which doesn't happen very often, but for some reason, if you get one of your case grades back and it's a 75%, it doesn't mean you have failed 697. You'll just have to balance a 75% with at least an 85% on another case to get that overall average up to 80%. I think, as I told you the last time we discussed 697, I cannot remember the last time that someone in the DL program did not at least achieve 80%. So at least folks in the DL program, you all tend to perform really, really well in 697. That's not always the case with stateside students, but I wouldn't be too terribly concerned at all about not getting to that 80% because I've been program director for 18 years and I cannot think of a time where someone's completed all 5 cases and didn't successfully complete 697. I do recommend that you try and get all 5 cases done before the end of the second section of 697. Again, it's not required. You'll get the RP grade even if you've only completed 1 case, but it would be nice if you can just clear the decks with your cases by the end of 697, and then you can move onward and upward in terms of finishing up the remaining courses in the program. So that is 697. Again, there are no scheduled meetings for 697. This is all just independent work on these case studies. Your work on the case studies should be done independently. So you don't want to submit a case study analysis that has a lot of similarity to someone else's case study analysis, because that will then be picked up and turn it in, and you don't want that to happen. So work on these individually, but we have no scheduled meetings for 697. If there is a sense that the cohort would like to have a check-in meeting, a check-in Zoom session, maybe between sessions 1 and 2, we can certainly accommodate that. So all you have to do is just let me know, and we can certainly set up a Zoom session for later on, but no weekly Zoom sessions for 697. Let me see, what else can I tell you? Officially and technically, the first section of 697 begins next Saturday on the 24th. You obviously have access to the cases now, so you can start working on the cases if you want to, beginning today if you would like. So you can turn those cases in as you complete them. I do recommend you turn them in as you complete them. Don't hold on to all 5 of them and turn all 5 in at once. Just go ahead and turn them in as you complete them, because then you can get some feedback early on. And if maybe the way in which you're doing the cases may not be the best way to do it, you'll get that feedback after that first case study is submitted. You don't have to wait and just get all the feedback at the end after you've turned in all 5. It also helps you split up the workload as well for Dr. Butts as well as for myself. So that would be helpful just to turn them in as you complete them. Reggie, go ahead.
Quick question. Do we need to turn them in order, or can we turn them in as we work them?
You can turn them in as you work on them. Yeah, they don't. Okay. There's no specific order to them. You can work on whichever ones you're most comfortable with. Just know that if you turn in the 670 and the 696 cases during the first session of 697, they'll probably get graded quicker because Dr. Butts, he's actively the instructor of that first section. If you turn in budgeting, HR, or organization theory, they will get graded, but I won't be checking in every single day on the 697 Canvas site because I'm not currently the instructor of 697. I won't be the official instructor until section 2, but you can turn them in any order that you would like. And and another very important point, I'm glad you brought that up. Another important point is that your cases will all be submitted directly into the 697 site. So do not submit your cases to the organization site. Submit your cases directly to our 697 Canvas site, this first section. So everything should be submitted to this first section of 697. We're trying to collect everything together in this first section so we don't have the cases split across 2 different sections. It's kind of a one-stop shopping for Dr. Butts and for myself when we go in there and we start grading those cases. So submit everything to section 1 of 697 in that Canvas site. Okay. Very good questions. Any other questions about 697 that you can think of at this time? Okay, I will talk with Dr. Butts and make sure that he doesn't, I don't think he'll want to, feel the need to have a session next Saturday for 697 since we've covered all this information today. So I think you'll probably end up getting 690, next Saturday off without needing a 697 section. But I will double check with him and just make sure that he doesn't feel it's necessary to have the session next Saturday. But I'm pretty sure he'll say no because we've already covered all the information. If you have any questions as you are working on these cases, feel free to reach out to me, shoot me an email. If you have specific questions for a specific case study, again, the questions on 670 and 696 should go to Dr. Butts. Questions on the other 3 case studies can come to me. I will say one thing, one qualifier for the budgeting case is that I tend to review the budgeting case with a great deal of latitude and flexibility, because I know you have budgeting with, I believe, Dr. Williams. And so I think people come into that class with differing skills in terms of Excel and budget construction. So what I'm kind of looking for in the budgeting case is I'm looking for what I like to call the old graduate school try, that if you don't have a whole lot of experience in Excel, you're at least able to put together a budget in Excel that makes sense and the numbers add up. That's kind of all I'm looking for with that budgeting case. So don't get too concerned about, there are some nuances in the case as Dr. Moore has written it that you may have a couple questions about, well, what's he mean by this or what's he mean by that? You can make reasonable interpretations, and as long as the interpretations you make are reasonable, they're going to be absolutely fine. If any of you work in education, when you read the case study, you're going to probably say, that's not the way summer school works. You know, that's not the way, we don't have to buy new desks for all these students. And that's true. But I think that, you know, the gist of it is it gives you the ability to put together a rudimentary budget in Excel. And that's really all we're trying to get out of that budgeting case study. Okay. Just a reminder that if you haven't submitted your organizational analysis paper or your final assessment yet, both of those assignments are due by midnight tonight. I've already received several organizational analysis papers, so thank you very much for that. I've been trying to grade them as they have come in, and so I think I may have already gotten and graded about 18 or 19 of them. So it really has helped me a lot to kind of lessen my load in terms of grading the rest of the weekend. So thank you. But if you haven't submitted those 2 assignments, make sure those come in by midnight tonight. I'll work on grading everything today, tomorrow, and probably into Monday, and hopefully then have everything ready to go and your final grades ready to turn in by next Tuesday. That's if everything goes well. Okay. Any final questions or anything at all in the last couple minutes we have left this morning? Everyone
Yes.
good? Okay, go ahead.
If we wanted to refer back to this recording, will it be available?
Yes, I will make this recording available. I'll actually make it available on the 697 Canvas site to make sure that you then have access to it throughout all of 697. So yes, I'll put it on the 697 site. Then I'm glad you mentioned that. That's a good reminder. So I won't put it on our 660. I'll put it on our 697. So you'll have continued access to it. Okay. All right. Yes, go ahead.
Which professors were in charge of which case studies? I think you said 670, 696 were Professor Butts, and then
yes. Yeah, then I do the other 3. Yes. Okay. Yeah, Dr. Butts does 670, 696, and I'll do the other 3. I may split some 696 with Dr. Butts, depending upon, I know in his syllabus, he says that he and I split 660. Honestly, in the past, I usually do all the 660s because I teach the 660 course. But yeah, Dr. Butts for 670 and 696, and then I'll do 555, 577, and 660.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, anything else before we wrap it up for the morning and wrap up the class? All right, if not, then I'm giving you back 4 minutes today, so at least you got that going for you. I'm sorry, we good?
Thank you for everything.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure working with everyone. I think everyone's done a really nice job in the class, and the organizational analysis papers I've reviewed so far. Yeah, I'm really looking for reasons to take off points because there's not really a reason. They're all very well done, and so so far they've all been easily in the A category, and I'm assuming they're going to stay that way. So thanks for all your hard work, and I'm sure we'll be talking again in the very near future. Any 697 questions? Just shoot me an email. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great Saturday. Talk to you soon.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Dr. Powell. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Dr. Powell.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for a great course.
Thank you.